The morning breeze drifted gently through the small countryside house, carrying the scent of wet earth and the soft call of roosters waking the village. Ly Tieu Ca stepped outside with a faint smile, whispering a greeting to the new day. The air was cool, tender, almost comforting, yet deep inside her chest, a familiar ache pressed quietly. It had been days since anyone heard from Hung. A man once so steady, so present, so protective, like a mountain behind her back. Now only an unanswered absence. But life did not wait for grief to settle. The sun rose, the children stirred, and the day began like every other. Inside the house, tiny footsteps padded across the floor. "Mama! Mama!" Little Han called softly, eyes half awake, clutching her small toy as if it were a piece of comfort. Tieu Ca bent down, brushing a soft kiss onto her daughter's forehead. "You woke up early today," she whispered, her voice warm, despite the heaviness in her heart. Baby Long wriggled in his blanket, blinking innocently at the ceiling. His gentle coos wrapped the room in tenderness. Even on the days she felt the loneliest, those small sounds kept her standing. She heated a pot of water over the fire, steam curling into the morning air. "Come here, sweetheart," she said as Han tiptoed to her side. "Let Mama wash your face so you can start your day fresh." Han giggled, splashing drops of warm water everywhere. For a moment, Tieu Ca's heart eased. These tiny, chaotic, beautiful moments were the pieces of happiness she held onto. When breakfast was done, she carried Long on her hip, guiding Han out to play. "Go see if your brother is awake," she teased, even though she already knew the answer. Han ran off with her joyful laugh echoing between the wooden walls. The house was simple, life was simple, but simplicity never meant easy. Without Hung around, every responsibility fell onto her shoulders. Cooking, tending to the children, cleaning, working, earning what little she could. And still, she had no room to be weak. Later that morning, she walked to the small orchard near her home. The trees bowed with ripe tangerines, their sweet, sharp scent filling the air. She picked each fruit carefully, gently, as though touching a small blessing from the land itself. Selling tangerines never made much money, but it kept food on the table. It kept her moving forward. Neighbors stopped by, tasting the fruit, chatting warmly with her. 10,000 per kilo, right? "It's cheap, dear. You could charge more," one woman commented. Tieu Ca only smiled. "As long as I can take care of my kids, it's enough." Their kindness soothed her, strangers becoming silent supporters of her little family. By noon, she returned home carrying a small basket of leftover fruit and a heart filled with mixed emotions. Han toddled over, tugging at her shirt, proudly announcing she had been taking care of Long. "You are a good sister," she told her gently, brushing dust from the child's cheeks. She cooked lunch as the children played, their laughter rising like sunlight in the small house. The pot simmered, the aroma filled the kitchen, and she worked with practiced hands, stirring, feeding, comforting, smiling through exhaustion. It was during moments like this, listening to Han hum while feeding Long, that loneliness crept in again. If Hung were here, she thought, he would be holding Long, or teasing Han, or telling her to sit down for a moment and rest. He would be laughing in that soft, warm way that always made her heart settle. But he wasn't here, and no matter how much she tried to push the fear aside, one question kept echoing in her mind. Why hasn't he come home yet? Still, Tieu Ca tucked her worries beneath her ribs, where she kept all her quiet pain. She couldn't fall apart, not when two small souls depended on her. So she smiled, For Han, for Long, for herself, and whispered into the fragile afternoon, "Maybe tomorrow will bring good news." The countryside wind carried her words away, leaving only the sound of children's laughter floating in the warm, gentle light of the day. The days that followed moved slowly, like clouds dragging themselves across a tired sky. Each morning, Ly Tieu Ca repeated the same quiet rituals, boiling water, waking the children, tending to the small home, yet something inside her was shifting. It was the silence where Hung's voice should have been. He usually called her no matter where he went. Short messages, rushed phone calls, even a simple, "Eat well, I'll be home soon." But this time, there was nothing. One evening, the wind picked up, rattling the bamboo walls as the sun sank behind distant hills. Tieu Ca stood at the doorway, holding baby Long in her arms while watching Han chase fireflies in the fading light. Her phone lay on the table behind her, cold and unmoving. She checked it again. And again. Still nothing. Her heart tightened. Is he hurt? Is he lost? Or has he simply chosen a life without us? The last question stung the deepest. She stepped outside to call Han back inside and nearly collided with Mrs. Nguyen, the neighbor who often helped her when Hung was away. "Child, are you all right? You look pale," the woman asked gently. Tieu Ca managed to smile. "I'm fine, just thinking." "Still no word from Hung?" She shook her head. The woman hesitated, then placed a hand on her shoulder. "If he doesn't return soon, you must be prepared. Life does not pause, dear. You have two little ones who need you more than ever." Those words, though soft, cut deep. But she nodded, because there was nothing else she could do. That night, after the children drifted into sleep, Han hugging her toy tightly and baby Long curled against her chest, Tieu Ca finally allowed herself to feel the fear she'd been swallowing for days. She sat beside the dimly lit window, the moonlight making her shadow tremble on the floor. Her hands shook as she held her phone, her heart whispering a prayer to the quiet sky. "Please, just let me know he's safe." But the night answered with more silence. The next morning, she forced herself back into routine. She swept the floor, hung blankets outside to dry, and prepared rice porridge for breakfast. Every movement felt heavier, but her children didn't need to see her worry. "Han, can you watch Long for a moment?" she asked gently. "Yes, Mama," the little girl beamed, always eager to help. She smiled at them, her joy, her strength, her reason to breathe. Later that day, she prepared a few bags of fruit to sell. The orchard had become her small refuge, a place where she could work, earn, and escape her spiraling thoughts. As she picked the tangerines, memories of Hung flooded her mind. How he carried Han on his shoulders through the field, how he held baby Long like something fragile and precious, how he always stopped by the orchard to tease her for working too much. "Slow down, Ca. You cannot pour from an empty cup." She closed her eyes, her hands trembling around the branch she held. "I need you, Hung, not just for the children, for me." But the wind only rustled the leaves, offering no comfort. When she returned home that afternoon, her phone finally vibrated. Her heart leapt, her breath stopped. A message. Her fingers shook as she opened it, only to find it was from the village women's group, reminding everyone about a gathering. The disappointment hit so hard, she had to lean against the wall to steady herself. Han looked up from the floor where she was playing with sticks and stones. "Mama, are you sad?" Tieu Ca swallowed her tears and shook her head. "No, sweetheart, Mama is just tired." She pulled Han close, brushing her fingers through her child's hair. Life was testing her, pushing her, shaping her, She didn't know where Hung was or why he disappeared without a word, but one thing was certain. She would not let despair win. Not while her children needed her warmth, her courage, and her smile. As night settled again, and she lay beside her sleeping babies, she whispered to the darkness, "If Hung returns, I will welcome him with a full heart. But if he does not, I will still stand tall." Her voice trembled, but her resolve did not. For the first time, she began to imagine a future built not around Hung's presence, but around her own strength. And perhaps, just perhaps, happiness was still possible, even without him. The story of Ly Tieu Ca teaches us that strength is not something we are born with, but something we grow into when life gives us no other choice. When Hung disappeared, she could have broken under the weight of fear and loneliness, yet she chose to stand for her children, to keep moving through the quiet mornings and heavy nights. Her courage shows that even in the absence of someone we once relied on, life continues to call us forward. Happiness does not depend entirely on one person. It blossoms from our resilience, our willingness to love, and our commitment to protect what matters. We learn that the heart can ache and still keep beating, that a mother can be tired and still rise again, and that a peaceful, warm life can be rebuilt even after loss. Above all, the lesson is clear. No matter who leaves or who stays, the true source of strength lies within ourselves, and with love and persistence, we can shape a future filled with hope.